Welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. I'm your host, Matt Freeman, and this week we are giving Scott's voice a little rest. He has not been feeling well for a few days, so instead of our regularly scheduled programming, we're going to treat you to an episode of Freeman Brothers, our patron-only bonus podcast, which is usually myself and my brother Daniel talking about a variety of topics that we're interested in. In this particular episode, we had Scott on as a guest previously, and so it was me, Daniel, and Scott discussing video games, including a discussion of which video games were most important to us as youths and why. And I thought it was a pretty fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, friends. Welcome to Freeman Bros. I'm Matt Freeman, and this is my brother, Daniel Freeman.
Hello.
And this is my other brother, Scott Daly.
Hey, everyone.
Daniel, what are we talking about today, and what's Scott doing here?
Today, we're talking about video games. And Scott's here because he was just so angry that we didn't invite him on to talk about MMOs when we discussed that a year ago.
Look, neither of you had played MMOs in like literally a decade, and I'm over here, the MMO guy, and you didn't invite me to talk about them.
Yeah, this is like when we invited Michael to talk about quantum physics, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's exactly the same, actually.
We have the professional, the expert here to school us. So basically we want to talk about like video games in general, but I know you've got a lot to get off your chest with regard to MMOs. So
I actually don't. So I thought I was going to, and then I actually went back and re-listened to y'all's episode today in preparation for this because I'm such a good guest. God, you should have me on every month. And actually, you guys said what I was going to say, except you didn't say it firmly enough.
All right. But please continue.
EverQuest is a terrible game that was awful, and it was fun in spite of its design, not because of it.
Interesting.
It's a terrible game that I love to death, but it's awful. It's awful. It's an awful game, and everything that has been done to MMOs has been done to fix terrible game decisions.
Well, so decisions. This is actually something I struggle with as someone that likes to just like noodle about game design. Is that how did a terrible game completely capture my entire youth and is maybe the best game, something I think of as the best game that I've ever played, even though it's objectively a bad game?
Because it's like the video of the train for the first time. If you've never seen a movie where a train moves, it's like, holy shit, that train is moving, but it's not a real train.
Yeah, and you run away. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You know, Okay. Let me. First of all, I think that I've spoken at length already about the fact that the ways in which EverQuest is horribly cumbersome and a pain in the ass is actually what makes it like real life, which is actually appealing to your brain in some way. It's just not fun.
No,
it's like a cookie clicker, right? Which is also not fun, but you find yourself doing it anyway.
Yeah, and like even the things in EverQuest that are fun are not like fun. Like the reason you talk to people in EverQuest is the same reason I talk to my coworkers. It's because I need food and I'm bored as shit. Like that's why. And like that's
you're hungry and you're thirsty and you're out of food and drink. So.
Yes.
Yeah, and you need some bone chips, damn it. Yeah. I mean you're right. I think we maybe even talked about this last time, but like even when I saw the first like magazine article in like a Wired magazine, because that was how we got information back then about EverQuest, it was clear even just from the magazine article that this was like going to change my life, right? Daniel, you probably remember the exact magazine.
Oh yeah,
I'm talking about.
I think I had mentioned this in the previous one. Like you were recovering from a surgery, and I like saw this magazine article, and I was like, "This is the coolest thing ever!" And then I got it because I wanted it to like cheer you up, and then proceeded to ruin our lives.
I'm being hyperbolic here. It was the coolest thing ever. I loved this game. I played it longer than both of you did. I played this game until Omens of War, which is the post Planes of Power expansion. So I played it longer than both of you.
Dang.
And like I loved the hell out of my time with the game, but like it wasn't good. It was stupid. It was a stupid game with stupid decisions. You know how hard it is to get the stupid magician epic? It's dumb. It's really dumb. And it's terrible design. Like, to get the Magician Epic, the last thing you need is a crown that's on like level 8 of the Plane of Air, and it takes 5 hours to get up there from level 1. And is there anything that any other class in the game needs on that level? No. So it's just for magicians to get 40 people together and go spend a whole day, and it's bad.
But it taught you all sorts of organizational skills, though, Scott.
No.
I mean, so I think I'm going to say, I'm going to take the controversial devil's advocate position here and say that's not necessarily bad game design, where you have something that has either an extremely high skill ceiling or an extremely high time investment necessary to get the thing, because it necessarily like means that there's something higher status than something else, right? Because if everyone is going to poop sock in your game, then having the thing that takes like 600 hours to get means that now it's like when you do a math test in college and like everyone gets a 20, but there's like the one kid that gets like a 95 because they've studied for like 600 hours. Like, being able to have an extremely high skill ceiling / extremely high time investment to get a thing means that there is a notion of scarcity and status amongst the highest, air quotes, highest tier things in the game.
Why does that need to be in the game?
Because then otherwise everyone gets all of the things, and everyone, like, you know, you get your full set of raid gear and you're not differentiated at all compared to anyone else that has their full set of raid gear.
But I mean, I think this is the thing, is like it's a fascinating sociological thing, because you didn't have to get your Mage Epic. You could have just not gotten your Mage Epic.
No, but everyone else was,
with your life.
Everyone else was getting their epics, and like, so I wanted mine, and it was really powerful and cool.
Sure, no, I know.
Would they have wanted to get it if it wasn't so hard to get?
I don't know. I mean,
no, they wouldn't have, and that's my point.
Possibly.
That's sort of true, because the epics aren't really that good, actually.
The most popular epic is the cleric one, because it has a right-click res, and it's also one of the easiest ones to get. So most of the clerics had their epics.
The thing about the epics, I get anxiety just reading about like the quest to get them, because there's like 100,000 steps, and it seems like any sort of interruption or bug or saying the wrong thing to an NPC could like destroy some no drop lore quest item.
Yeah.
And then you have to start over.
You've wasted literally hundreds of hours. Yeah.
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 I mean,
see, that's awesome. That, to me, that is actually what makes EverQuest awesome, is that they had the cojones to make something in the game that required like 600 hours of effort.
But here's the thing: is I don't think they did that on purpose. I just
they
didn't know what they were doing.
They didn't know they absolutely didn't know what they were doing, and it has never been replicated satisfactorily since.
Because you can't replicate, like, you can't intentionally set out to replicate bad design, because no one will sign off on that ever.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just as an experiment, I sometimes think that I should generate like a randomly designed game, which is where everything is just nonsense. And the problem is that sentence doesn't really mean anything.
Well,
what does that look like?
You've heard of NetHack, right?
I've heard the name. I don't really know what it is.
The famously difficult roguelike, where if you try to play it without reading anything about it, you're just going to die repeatedly, because it's there's so many little, like, if you don't know the trick about the thing, you'll like drink the water when you're standing on this tile in the room, and then you'll die, because that's like the no water drinking. Like, it's that's a made up example, but like the game is full of things like this where you'll just die for no reason, and it's extremely difficult because of this. And people love it. People love NetHack. It's got a whole rich internet following of like strats to beat the game, because it's so famously difficult.
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole Souls-like thing, which kind of gets into, I think, the conversation you guys wanted to have, which was like a broad video game design conversation.
Because already we're finding a sort of like axis of like difficulty versus fun being the point of the game.
Yeah. Well, and so I played Dark Souls for the first time last year. I'd never played any of the Souls-like games. I think I bought Bloodborne and like died and said, I don't want to play this. And then I just went away. And then our friends at the game club were doing Dark Souls. And so I sat down and said, I'm going to play Dark Souls. And what I found was the game's actually not hard. Like, it's not difficult. It's just exhausting. and it just tries your patience. Like the actual, like, I mean, the boss fights can be difficult, but it's never like an insurmountable difficulty. It's just designed to waste your time as much as possible. And so beating Dark Souls is not about getting good. It's about having the patience to not quit after you die and realize you got to now run fucking 45 minutes back and redo all the shit you were doing before. And like, it's just a gauntlet. And I don't know. I don't think that's fun. And I know obviously some people do. You're absolutely right. Obviously some people do. And like Dark Souls is a game where nothing in the game tells you anything about the game. To learn about the game, you like have to go to wikis and like see what other people have said about stuff. And I get the appeal of that, but I think it's just awful.
Yeah, I think it dovetails similarly with the whole idea of like, you know, y'all have talked about this before about movie criticism, where it's like you'll start ragging on a thing when you just don't like it, and if you do like it, you're willing to just not rag on the thing because you don't care, you're having fun. And it's like the degree to which the game, that like the fundamental gameplay loop like vibes with your vibe, you're okay with it. Like it doesn't bother you because it's you conceptualize it as something that's like, oh yeah, I'm getting better at this thing. Any forward progress I make, I'm willing to overlook the 12-hour corpse run I have to do to the Plane of Fear now that I'm level 45 and can't go there anymore.
And I mean, the thing about Dark Souls is there were moments in this game where I was in love with the game. Like you go into a new area and you spend an hour like exploring this new area and seeing stuff you've never seen before, and you come across these incredibly designed monsters, and then you just run up against something stupid and die and realize, oh wait, I gotta go do that all over again. And like, I mean, the argument is made and could be made that, well, the only reason it was fun is because you have this impending sense of danger the entire time, that you could die at any moment, and so there's a stress to your exploring. It's not just blind exploring, it's stress-filled exploring. And I mean, that's true, but I still think there's a better way of exploring that without this kind of intentionally frustrating game design.
So have you played Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy?
A little bit.
Math, have you seen this game before?
No, I never heard of it.
So this game is great, and it's basically it's the game that exactly is built to stress this point. And it's made by is it the guy that made QWOP? I think so. So the game is, you start and you're a man sitting in a bucket, like a cauldron, and you have a like hammer, the mouse control is like a sort of weirdly one-to-one mapping between like where your mouse is. He will try to move the tip of the hammer to where your mouse is, and then you just have to that being your only way of controlling this guy, you have to get over a series of obstacles. And then like as you get over obstacles in the background, Bennett Foddy kind of narrates philosophically about the idea of difficult game design. And it's just like the obstacles get increasingly difficult over time, and anytime you make mistakes, you lose tons of progress, so you have to do everything over again. And it's a beautiful gameplay experience that's a riff on this entire idea, which is like games that are made just to be like cliff walking experiences where you are going to fall off the cliff repeatedly, and you just have to practice exactly the right motion over and over and over and over until it then becomes trivial because you figured it out. But it's like it's very weirdly human. It's a weird human psychology thing going on there.
Yeah, I have an unsubstantiated theory, which is that like games are a bit distorted by the fact that they sort of had their birth in arcade games, where they actually wanted the game to be fun enough that you would want to play it, but also really hard so that you would definitely die after a little bit.
Yeah, and
then you'd have to put in another coin.
Yeah.
And then when you died, you would reset completely. Like especially the old games, you wouldn't really like pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I mean, the entire concept of like ramping difficulty is because we want to get you sucked into the game early, but we also want you to blow your whole load of quarters before you beat the game.
There's a Netflix documentary that touches on this exactly, actually, called High Score. And they talk about how they could track the like revenue on arcade games based on how good gamers got at the game, because then once they were good at it, they would just stop playing, and they would have to make the things harder, and then the gamers would come back to play the harder game, and then it's just like this arms race between the people like modding literal arcade cabinets to make them harder, and the gamers now getting better at the newly modded arcade cabinet and like wanting the next thing.
Yeah.
That's
so
go ahead, Scott.
I guess my question is like, do people beat Dark Souls because they enjoy playing Dark Souls, or do people beat Dark Souls because they enjoy having beaten Dark Souls? And like the same with the Magician Epic, the same with these incredibly hard games. Like, is the playing of the game the fun, or is it just entirely the feeling of getting to say you've accomplished that thing fun?
I think it's neither of those things. I think it's they can't stand knowing that they haven't beaten the game. It's not that it feels good when you beat the game. It's that the mountain is there and thus must be climbed.
Sure.
It's the completionist instinct. Like I was going to, so you and I are going to talk about God of War at some point in more depth. But I wanted to talk about God of War a little bit here because it perfectly makes the point that I want to make, which is that, so in the main game of God of War, even on the highest difficulty, it's really perfectly made such that whenever you die in a fight, you start over basically right at the beginning of that fight, and you haven't lost any gear or gold or experience or anything. It's just like, okay, try again, die again, try again, and then you finally, like, you try that fight on the hardest difficulty, and especially toward the beginning of the game when you don't have any good gear, it takes you 15 times, you finally beat the fight, you feel really good, you move on. In the main game, it's not nearly that hard, actually. You actually just kind of feel like a badass, and you're just mowing your way through dudes. And you die sometimes, but when you die, it feels like a very minor setback, as you're just like, okay, reset. Okay, what did I do wrong? All right, I need to prepare for that extra ogre to show up. All right, move in, go through. And that's one way. That's one way of playing games, obviously, where it's just like you're churning through, and when you die, you really lose very little. It's more just like, okay, try again, buddy, putting you back on the bike. You can do it. But then you get to the end game, and you open up one of the kind of side areas that's totally optional. And this is the only way to get the best gear in the game, is if you do the side area. And the side area is like a completely different game, because it leverages more of the mechanic of what you guys are talking about here, where it's like you have to clear this enormous dungeon and collect this particular kind of resource. And if you die at any point in your run, you lose all of the resource for that entire run. And it's super infuriating. And it feels totally different from any other part of the game, but I still did it. Because it's like, well, I have all the other good gear. I need to get this. This is like the last piece of gear I don't have. I need to finish the thing, so it's like it's a strong compulsion. And it wasn't like I was like having fun. It really was, it really was like a compulsion to finish. That's my personal experience anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Daniel. So much of the games I play now is literally just this completionist compulsion that I have, that like, I have not gotten this character to the max level, or I have not unlocked all these things, or I just the idea of finishing the game. And it's less that I'm having fun in the moment with a lot of games these days. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of the games I play. Like, I'm playing a game called Horizon Zero Dawn right now. Like, this game got rave reviews. Like, everyone was in love with it. I'm really interested in the sequel. I watched the trailer for the sequel, and so I was like, I got to play this first one first before I play the sequel when it comes out for PS5 eventually. And I just realized the other day that I'm just like playing this game and I'm not enjoying any of it. It's like a very standard open world type game design where there's just 7,000 things on the map for you to do, but they're just like repeats of the same thing. It's like it's like the Far Cry model where you just go into this enemy stronghold and kill all the bad guys, and then you will open the enemy stronghold or climb this tall thing, and then you will unlock more of the map. And it's just the same shit. And like, I do it because it's there on the map and it's right there. It's right there. You can just run over to it, and the game is constantly saying, "Ooh, there's a new thing over here. There's a new thing over there." But I never like, that's not fun. It's just, I'm doing it because it's there.
Yeah, I think I'm in the different quadrant of this game style axis where I'm just like allergic to completionist mechanisms.
I wish I was.
And I have, like, even growing up, like, I didn't really even finish very many games I played because it would sort of get to the point where it's like, all right, I see the shape of this thing. I like see what the mechanics are. I see what is possible with the mechanics. And I even see, like, if I were better at the game, what I could do. And if that's not compelling, like if the idea of that doesn't seem fun to me, I start bouncing off a game pretty quickly. And the games that have actually held my attention the most have been things that are like, online multiplayer things where there's like tremendous strategic diversity, and it's a lot harder to get a sense of like the right way to do things, because often that's like an evolving meta gameplay landscape but then that can get so hard that it's like, well, I'm just bad at this and it's not fun to play anymore because whatever reason. So yeah, I definitely don't. Very few games have I actually like fully completed, and I don't think I've really ever like 100% in a game because it's just I don't.
I mean, that's the ironic thing is I very rarely actually 100% games myself, even if I have that completist itch, because normally I just at some point in the process of the game realize that I'm bored and I stop doing the side stuff and I just finish the game, and I leave it saying, did I enjoy that? Did I really? I don't know. Like, do you play any of the kind of the Ubisoft open world type game model at all, Daniel?
So Laura was playing Assassin's Creed for a long time, and I would sit and watch her play Assassin's Creed, and then occasionally like do fights in Assassin's Creed, and it's fun from a like absorbing history perspective, which is already kind of strained because it's an Ubisoft game. But they do something of a good job. Like, it's not entirely made up, right? It's like based on a true story. But I have not played those games. I think maybe the closest thing to that is like Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is not even really an open world game, really. I mean, it kind of is, but it's much tighter of a story than something like the Assassin's Creed games.
It's better than any Ubisoft version of this concept ever.
Yeah.
Even though I have a bone to pick with that game because I hate breakable weapons, but that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole lot. Yeah, that's I agree. That's nonsense.
I mean, the last time I tried to play a game like that was one of the Far Cries, and I think what happened was I probably played for like an hour, and then I found like a Cessna, and I just like flew like 5 miles in some direction, and then landed in the water, and then past that point, I had broken the game completely. Like I was facing the wrong enemies, I was triggering the wrong plot events. I was meeting people who I wasn't supposed to meet yet. It was really obvious that this was the case, and it was like, okay, this is not you didn't do this right. You weren't supposed to let me get in the Cessna, obviously.
Great.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I've gotten mature enough to recognize when I'm not enjoying a game, and usually the signal for me is it's very hard for me to actually just quit a game totally, but the signal for me that I'm actually not enjoying a game is every time I die, I stop playing. Like every single time. Like there's very rarely a time where I'll die and then reload and then keep going. If I'm not enjoying the game, then I'll turn on and off the PS4 like 6 times in the course of a day, where I'll just like, okay. I get over my annoyance and jump back in and then die again. I'm like, okay. Sucks. I don't actually like this. I mean, God of War is interesting because God of War is kind of sort of using the open world type model. It's not quite as strict as and terrible and rote as the Ubisoft model, but it is like a land that you can traverse however you want.
Yeah.
Well, with a bunch of different activities and side quests and things you can chase down and collectibles and blah, blah, blah.
The key thing that God of War does is everything is oriented around a central hub. And so you're never more than like 5 minutes away from anything else. So you don't end up in this situation where you're like, all right, I got to go to, North Fadark, and, it's an hour journey. It's like, no, anywhere you want to go, you're actually pretty close to it, because you go back to the Lake of Nine, and then you go to where you wanted to go. It's like, it's not a big deal, especially when you get fast travel later in the game. But even when you're just using the boat, it's still not that bad. And then also the game is really good about letting you very explicitly know what the next story point is. So you know where to go if you want to advance the story, but you don't have to do that. So you never, it gives you the feeling of being open world and that you have all these options, but it completely, in my opinion, avoids all the pitfalls of being like, all right, what am I supposed to do? I'm confused and lost and feel like this is poorly designed.
So how important is story to y'all when talking about game design?
I mean, like I do find that the games that I've loved recently have all been games with incredibly good stories. That said, like the game that I've played the longest is StarCraft 2 multiplayer, which is literally just fighting monsters against other people and has no story at all. So it depends. I think it's almost I see them as almost two different types of things.
This is I was literally going to say these are two different things that we just happen to call games that are different. Like one of them is an interactive book, and which has elements of game design injected into it to keep you engaged. And honestly, most story-driven games actually are pretty bad stories. Like games are actually pretty bad at storytelling. I'm gonna have shots fired here, but like it's true. And then there's just the entire other thing, which is like having a compelling gameplay loop that you might as well just be polygons flying around a void world, and that's all you need for the concept to be compelling. But sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I mean a couple things. Like I think that's totally true, and I think I go to different games for different things. Like I would generally call myself a type of gamer that enjoys being told a story. I mean, I love stories. Like obviously, I love stories, and so even in every type of entertainment I have, I want to be told a good story, and so I tend to gravitate towards the games that have a good story. But there are times when I just want to play Dr. Mario. And I just want to play Dr. Mario for like 30 minutes. Yeah. And I love the simple, repetitive loop of that type of gameplay thing. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that, going back to God of War, I promise I'm not going to ruin our conversation on the Doofcast one day, Matt. But
no, we're structuring it.
Yeah. Like that is a game that achieves very good story, but I think it does have a very satisfying gameplay loop. And I think part of that is that choice that you kind of started the conversation about that game with, to get you back into the action right away. Mm-hmm. Like there's a game called Celeste that is it's a 2D platformer that I absolutely love. Amazing game. And I've died literally like 2,000 times on that game. No, that's too low. 10,000 times on that game. And it's really hard platforming. It's very precise. It's very unforgiving at times. But like when you die, you're back like immediately. And so there's such a huge difference between you die and you're back in the action right away versus you die and then you have to load and then you have to run.
I just, oh God, I can't handle the like twitchy platform. It's like, I can't, when I start playing it after I've died 50 times, I'm like, you know what? If time moved 10 times slower, I would have been done with this game already, because then I would have had the reaction time to do all of the things that it wants me to do. And there's nothing interesting about that. It just means I don't have the muscle memory to do it as fast as it wants me to. And then I bounce off of it.
But you do,
but I don't want to. I don't like it. I see how to do it, and I'm just like, nah.
But
next.
I mean, it's amazing that like you can walk into a room, die on it 200 times, and then on your 201st attempt, you just ace it, and it's just like it's nothing. It's easy. That's a remarkable thing.
There's something ineffable here, which I think. When there's something ineffable, you have to try to put a box around it, even if you can't F it, as Terry Goodkind would say. And basically it's like it just kind of sounds like that's not fun to you, Daniel. And you'd be like, yeah, obviously that's what I was saying. And I'm like, no, but like that's actually a critical point, because like the combat in God of War, I'm going to talk about God of War a lot. I'm sorry. It's the only game I played recently. The combat in God of War is just like intrinsically fun for me, because it maps on to like, I'm a dude with an axe and a shield, and there's a bunch of monsters, and I have like many options at any moment, and I can dodge this way, block this guy, parry, attack, dodge, attack, jumping strike, and like you get better and you figure out strategies, and you think like, okay, I'm approaching this the wrong way. Let me rethink, and like it's very fun to me.
it cultivates a sense of familiarity with tools.
Yeah.
And then if you feel like a god of those tools that you can wield as if a magical language to dispatch your enemies. Like I actually completely get the psychology around that being fun. I just have never gotten into a platformer enough that I felt like that I would have fun. It never got to that point, right? Like I just was like, I see where this is going, and I can't go anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
Isn't that fascinating? Because like, I mean, there are people out there that could be listening to this right now that absolutely love the Souls-like games, and the exact things that I'm complaining about those are the things that they love and find fun in the game. And that's like the challenge in talking about game design is you have to get around, is this a design that is designed quote unquote well, but is just not for me, versus is this just bad design? And it's like it's very tempting for me to just look at a game like the first Dark Souls and say this game was just designed poorly and people liked it in spite of its bad design. But I mean, obviously that can't be 100% true, because people love that game.
We started this conversation talking about EverQuest,
but that is 100% true.
I think I mean, well, I mean, definitely let's be precise here. Like, in order to say it's designed badly, that's an implicit standard of what a good game is, which I don't even know what a good game is. Like I this is the reason we're having this conversation is because it's fun to talk about, but I don't have some kind of overarching theory of game design. If anything, it's like, maybe we can muddle through and find some key points as we chat about this. I
mean, I think the real statement is there are knobs that if I had control of the game, if I could turn those knobs, this would be more fun to me. Yeah, and those are not universal knobs. Those are person specific knobs for every single game in existence exist.
But I mean, you could say that like is Irreversible a bad movie because it has a horrible scene that no human being wants to watch in it. I mean, it's doing that on purpose, obviously. Like, that's a choice. And this is the same way with like Dark Souls. That's all they're doing that on purpose. Like they're definitely making it sort of unplayable on purpose. So and it's totally fair to be like, well, I hate it.
But I mean, so to talk about movies versus game, I think this is really interesting because like, and maybe it's just I have much more comfort talking about film than I do a video game because I know more about it. But like, you can look at a movie and say that is a technically poor decision that was just made there. Like the way the place they put the camera fails to convey the emotion that I feel the movie wanted to convey. They just failed to do it. And I mean, you could probably like dive into game design and get into moments that are just like the design choice that you made here fails to get across the feeling of fun that you wanted to get. Yeah, but I think it's so much harder to do that. I think.
Yeah, I think it's harder. Game. I think it's harder to do that in games because there's maybe more diffusion of responsibility. Where like typically in a movie, there's a guy telling you where to put the camera, right? And like that is something that can be failed easily if it's just done bad. Whereas there's probably like a team of like 600 programmers on a AAA game that are part of every single design decision for every single little thing, and there's hundreds of people play testing and tuning all. So it just becomes a kind of gestalt mess of a thing out the other end, and it's not obvious. There's not an obvious thing wrong with it. There's just like a whole bunch of things that could be tuned better to make it more up your alley. And then it becomes an argument around like what are the types of person or what are the types of alleys that games can be up, and did this game successfully navigate the alley it was aiming for? And that's a much more vague conversation, I think.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I encourage people making the things they want to make, I guess is one thing. There's one thing that I would say, but at the same time, like, I guess maybe there arises a need to sort of define like, what is the point here? And for me, the point is like, well, I want to try to figure out if I were going to make a game, how I would go about it. And if I were going to make a game, I would try to make it fun and engaging and flowy and quick but also with an element of strategy where maybe from time to time you're encouraged to sit back and rethink your approach, and it's sort of incrementally challenging you with slightly different problems to expand your mind. Like all of these things, these are the things I love about gaming. And you talk about a game like Dark Souls, which I haven't played, but it kind of sounds like they're doing a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't fall on that list. And so I'm like, okay, that's neat, good for them. I'm not really interested in studying that game because I don't feel like I would learn much about it relative to what I'm actually trying to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's the alley of game. I will push back and say they are doing that, but for someone that isn't you.
Yeah,
like
sure.
There actually aren't, maybe the more controversial statement, there aren't universal game design principles because people are not universal in the types of things they enjoy.
I mean, it's funny you guys were talking about platformers, and I was reflecting, like, one of the platformers that I don't actually play it much, but my son plays it a lot is Mario Odyssey. And it reminded me how much I have always hated the levels where the ground is ice, because it takes away the sense that you like you rely on this. You get a very like tactile, like you in a very real sense, your brain, like, I think, uses the neurons that it uses for movement in space, and it uses them to control Mario in the game. And you get used to the way the world responds to your actions, and then you move over to these ice levels where you're slipping around, or like you land and you're like, that should have been a perfect landing, but I had momentum, and so I slid off the edge, or something like that. And you're just like, argh! And like I hate it.
It's so funny because that's literally Mario 1. Like the first Mario had a very slidey, momentum scale. Like the very first game, like you would easily jump over a gap and then slide off the other end. And then they just made ice and did that.
I mean, this is ironic because this is sort of what I would describe as one of, to contradict myself immediately, one of the universal game design principles is to introduce a mechanic, familiarize the player with the mechanic, and then put a twist on the mechanic.
Yeah. Well, see, I would
repeatedly.
I would just call this a pet peeve of mine, right? Like I have no trouble. Like, I'm not even trying to say like they made a bad choice by making the ice thing. I'm just I personally, it doesn't strike me as like a fun new challenge.
Oh yeah.
It strikes
me
I know. As like,
right. Like, so there's to deep pull here. When I play a online first person shooter called Tribes Tribes 2, any of the Tribes franchise games.
Are you still playing that game?
I occasionally play it, but
oh my god,
I play Tribe. I play the more recent one, which is Tribes Ascend or something. But there's this thing where if you go get the flag, and you got the flag, you're getting back to your base, and one of the enemies kills you. You drop the flag, and then they return the flag, and then they suicide to respawn back at their base. And this drives me insane that this is like an allowed mechanic, because somewhere in my mind, it's like, it's not fair that they could chase me across the map and then just immediately teleport back to defend their flag. That shouldn't be allowed. That's breaking all the rules of like what would make this a more compelling gameplay loop, which is that there's a cost to chase someone down who has. But the point is, I'm fighting my psychology is fighting the game design here, right?
Well,
I can't get over the fact that this is how the game is, and it drives me insane, even though I have no control over this.
I think it's because if you're going to call something capture the flag, you expect it to follow like I think gameplay loop is a fine word to say. Like the gameplay loop of capture the flag is that position actually matters a lot, and if you can, like you said, teleport back to your base, then you're like, oh, this sucks. That's funny. I just have to give a little sidebar on like how Daniel's like a Tribes 2 savant. And like, I mean, I've always been really bad at video games, but I remember being a kid, like in high school, and I would see Daniel pull off these shots that I was just like, that's not possible. Like the guy when the agent jumps across the streets in the Matrix, just like, that's impossible.
Yeah,
he's really good at that game.
Gotta love that game. Such a good game. So good. And a good game has not been made since Tribes 2.
It is. I mean, just to go on that tangent, like if I was gonna make a game, it would be like that. It would be an FPS where you have like a rocket pack and fall damage is not a thing.
Yeah.
And so but momentum is a thing.
Yeah.
And so you're moving around rapidly through space, but do it with like modern graphics where, I mean, and then you have a lot of splash damage weapons. So you're playing this sort of game of trying to outwit your opponent and anticipate where they're going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's there's so much unexplored design space there because everyone is stuck in first person shooter land with the crouch cover mechanic and the corners and the battle pass. And it's like, there's so much more to the world of games than the like narrow valley of war-based first-person shooters that we've carved out over the past 20 years.
We've been going for like half an hour. One of the things I wanted to do in this conversation was kind of tick off some of the like big important games of our pasts, if that's something you guys are interested in. I Scott, I know maybe I didn't tell you to prepare for that, but I assume you have some off the top of your head. Yeah. Scott, do you want to start since you're the guest?
Sure. Like, obviously, this is a way to preface a conversation I kind of wanted to have, but one of the most important games in my life has been Final Fantasy. And the first Final Fantasy is a game that I distinctly remember my dad bringing home and me playing it with him and just being like, as a kid who's played nothing but sports games and Super Mario, like the coolest thing in the world to me was watching my dad assign attacks for his characters and then put down the controller and then watch as the characters do it themselves. I just remember like 7-year-old me being like, that is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And I think that game is kind of timeless in a way. And yet I spent half of last year replaying every single Final Fantasy game. I was without a job, and so I spent my afternoons playing Final Fantasy 1 through Final Fantasy 15, and I kind of came to the conclusion that most, if not all of these games are actually just bad. They're just bad games, and they're bad in the game design, like the combat and the story. They're just mostly all bad games, and I think it's really interesting to me the ways in which, like, even like 2, 3, and 4, and 5 and 6, I don't think are perfect games, but the ways in which I have more patience for the bad games of a certain era and less patience for the bad games of a later era. Like, I used to call Final Fantasy VII one of my favorite games of all time. It's not a very good game. it's not like there's fun parts in the story for sure, but like the gameplay loop of it is just not very engaging.
We did the Final Fantasy VII remake, and then after that we started playing the original just to like nostalgia, and it would be unplayable if I couldn't play it at 3x speed. Like it's everything is wrong about the cadence and the like. And I also usually do the thing where you can instantly kill anyone because like I have no patience for like drawn out battles with the JRPG, like beep boop boop, cast Fire-Raga.
Oh my god!
And then you have to cast that like 30 times and then heal. Like I can't. It sucks. It's bad. You're right. It's a bad game. Sorry, everyone.
It's so interesting though because like Final Fantasy V, like, is a game that you do similar things to that. Like you're still shit tons of random encounters against things that you can easily kill or things that are annoyingly take a while to kill. But for some reason, the gameplay loop in that game is so much more tolerable. And I think it's just a speed thing. It's just that because in Final Fantasy VII, every time you get into a battle, you have this swooping camera that like circles around the battlefield and like shows your characters get into stance. And then every time they attack, they like, we change camera angle and see him rush forward and attack, and every spell and every summon. And then meanwhile, Final Fantasy V is just like bloop bloop, and then you just go back to what you were doing. And like it was wild to me, the shift from 6 to 7. And I don't like. I'm not saying they suddenly forgot how to design a game. It's just as the style shifted, they just became intolerable.
I remember like there was a thing where you would cast Knights of the Round and then you would like chain cast Knights of the Round, and it would just be like 8 minutes of watching this animation.
Yeah.
And it's like, this isn't a game anymore. What are you doing? I mean, what happened is they just fell in love with their ability to do at the time, these amazing graphics.
Yes.
Sure.
Which was amazing at the time.
Yeah.
It was so cool. That's something we'll never be able to communicate to the youngins, where like having doubling the polygon count in your game was like world-changingly amazing.
Yeah.
But
caring about the death of a character was like, holy shit, in 1997.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was really surprising to me, and that I loved, like, Final Fantasy 1 is a game that like I can't judge in any kind of way because I'm so in love with like the memories of that game. Like, I think thinking about like the games that are most important to me, they're almost all connected to a specific memory of my childhood that has nothing to do with the game itself. And I think that's one of the interesting things about like the power of nostalgia.
Yeah. I mean, that's true for sure. There's a lot of games on my list that I would say that they are important either because of pure nostalgia, like kind of that, and or just they were the coolest thing in the world at that moment. And then it was now impossible to explain to anyone why that was cool. Mm-hmm. Like I think the number one game that suits that bill is the Mission Impossible game on the Super NES.
I've literally never heard of this game.
It's so good. It's so good though.
Right. Like it's not like a game anyone has heard of. It's not like a great, but like the thing is, it was the first game where
this was N64.
It was N64 because the graphics were actually good. But so it was. You've seen, Mission Impossible #1, Tom Cruise, right? Yes, everyone has. So like the first level is sort of like a riff on the beginning of that movie where you're trying to get the knock list, but it provides like a bunch of other paths of how you could do things, and like a pretty good like it was the first time where it was like there's Hitman is actually what it reminds me of now. Like that would be the closest analogy, is like you have a mission and there's a bunch of ways you could go about it, but they're like multi-step, where it's like you have to like poison this person and then find them in the bathroom and then make a mask with their face and then use the face to scan and it was like, oh my god, like this is so cool. Like you can interact with the environment and it's like you're really in this world. And now that's like every game. Every single game.
Yeah.
So but at the time it was just like, me and Dale, I think I speak for both of us, it was just like nothing had ever been this cool.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
So why do you think some games are timeless and some games age terribly? Like, I mean, like The Legend of Zelda, right? Like, I think we're probably going to talk about Ocarina of Time at some point during this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's probably on all of our list.
Sure. That game is amazing and I love it. The first Legend of Zelda game, the Nintendo one, it hasn't aged well. Mm-hmm. Like, I played it a couple months ago on a whim because I was like, I want to play some Zelda. And I think it's for free if you have a Switch account, whatever. And I played it and I beat it. And it's just like, this isn't that good of a game. I don't think this has aged well. Like, it's just, everything is better. And yet the Super Nintendo one has aged flawlessly. And it's just as good as it was when I first played it.
Okay.
And I don't understand why that is in some ways. And I think Mario, like the original Mario, like kind of ice sliding, momentum jumping aside, I think is a timeless game that you could play at any moment and works just as well today as it did however many years ago that was. 40. Jesus.
Oh my God.
I think it was 35 actually.
Okay. Yeah.
It's only 35.
I don't know. I think it might have something to do with like the right amount of simplicity, where it's like if it's simpler than a certain amount, then you don't care.
Sure.
But if it's just the right amount of simplicity, or just some perfect threshold of simplicity and complexity, then you can kind of get sucked into it. Mm-hmm. Like, we're good. I mean, we can build a whole world out of just black text on a white page. So a game doesn't need to do much to suck us in, but it needs to do something. And maybe that's, I don't know. I haven't played those games.
I would even wager to say there's a requirement of like the basics are, it's easy to get into, hard to master. The old saying, where like there has to be an approachableness to the game where you can pick it up and you can play it any time, because the mechanics are straightforward, but then the sorts of things that are allowed by those mechanics are like extremely high skill ceiling possible.
Yeah.
And tons of tactical depth. And I think that's legitimately hard to pull off. Like, very few games can walk this line without being frustrating because they just make encounters too difficult for, you know, the vast majority of people that are playing the game, or it's trivial and it's just like you bounce off of it because you're bored. Like it's razor thin. And I think it's actually like, this depends on you, and it depends on like your gaming literacy and like how many other games you've played, to the extent that like a good version, a good timeless game just might not vibe with you anymore because your skill threshold is past where it's targeting.
I also think the story probably plays a big role. Like, well, one of the games on my list that I'll just briefly mention here as a parenthetical is Loom, the old LucasArts sort of like Monkey Island-esque. Like, it's basically, you know, almost a cartoon, except sometimes you have to click on things to make the character move around. It's just it's a story game with, you know, it's on rails. I don't know. I'm sure there's a correct word to use here, but like, you only ever play that game because of the story.
I mean, I was not as into the LucasArts games. My big thing was the King's Quest series from Sierra. So like, King's Quest 6 would be on my list for similar reasons. And I don't know. I'm like, the thing about King's Quest that interests me is, at what point in my life did I get to the point where I don't have patience for zero forgiveness in games anymore? You know, like there used to be a series of adventure games were very, very popular when we were young, especially on the computer. And they were absolutely unforgiving, where King's Quest does not tell you what to do ever. You have to figure it out yourself. You can die like 700 different ways, so you have to always remember to autosave. Like, I remember my whole family was playing King's Quest 6, and we were all stuck at this one part. There are these gnomes that represent the 5 senses, and we had got every single one of them beat except for the one that represented taste, and we could not figure it out. We were stuck on it for like 3 months as a family, like all of us could not figure out what the hell to give this gnome. And it ends up being like, there's a pawn shop and there's a bowl of mints, and you just take a mint from the pawn shop and then you feed it to the gnome, and he's like, oh, there's nothing here, it's just a mint leaf, and then he goes away. And it's like the dumbest thing ever, but like, why did I have the patience for that back then, where today I would have just said, fuck this. I would have either just looked it up or I would have just quit playing. Like,
yeah, I think there's an inseparable social element to that. That's sure. Which is one thing. It is a whole thing, actually. But like, there's also the like, it's how what does it mean to you that you can actually make this gnome go away? Like, how important, how much has the story hooked you that you're willing to do this thing? And if the rest of the game works well enough, like, that you will try to get rid of that gnome at all costs.
But I mean, the interesting thing is, I've tried to go back and like, I bought the King's Quest collection off of Steam because they had like all 7 games for like $10 or something ridiculous. And I was like, I'm going to play through the King's Quest games. And I went into King's Quest 1 and I like walked around for 5 minutes. And I was like, I don't know what to do.
Well, there's no mystery. Game. There's no mystery anymore, right? It's like a puzzle. It's like a puzzle that you put together on a table 20 years ago, and then you come back upon this puzzle that you've already finished, and then you see someone like mess it up, and you're like, well, do you want to do the puzzle again?
But like, what if I don't remember what the puzzle looked like? Like,
would you want to put like, I kind of, puzzles kind of drive me crazy, but like, would you want to do that?
But like, so, I mean, say someone takes the King's Quest engine and makes an entirely new game using the same assets and characters and stuff. I don't think I would have patience for that either. I think I would walk around for 5 minutes and go, I don't know what to do next, and I would quit.
Would you do it if there was like an internet movement around like an ARG for the thing, and like everyone on the internet right now is posting memes about what to do next in this crazy puzzle adventure?
But that's, I mean, I guess so, but that's not like, I don't know.
Because that's sort of like your entire family trying to solve the puzzle at the same time is the
kind of, I guess. I don't even think we figured it out. I think we went to a GameStop and opened a guidebook. Do you remember those guidebooks?
Yes.
That like,
yes,
they weren't actually guidebooks. Yes. They had the the weird I don't know what it was, but it like covered the page, and then you had to put like a red viewfinder over it to read the hints.
Yes,
like that's what we used to figure out how to beat this gnome.
I actually sorely miss the world where the first time you came to a dungeon, you had to like you need to draw the map of the dungeon on pencil and paper, because there's not just a website that has the entire map and the strategy for beating it for everything that exists.
See, the great contradiction of my life is I agree with you 100%. I miss that. And yet, if I walked into a game that made me do that, I'd be like, fuck this. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't know, because I actually haven't seen a game that has tried to do that. And because, I mean, nowadays you'd have to make it procedural every time, because otherwise people would just make a map and then we're back to where we started. And that's like 1,000 times harder, is making the compelling procedural dungeon that also balances all the other hard things about game design at the same time.
I think that we just care about different things because we're old now also.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just have much less tolerance for things wasting my time at 35 than I did at 8.
Like using my Oculus is one of the things that has reminded me of like, you know, it's funny because everybody who plays the Oculus and plays like Half-Life Alyx, which is sort of the like tour de force of what you can do in VR, they just
give me one of them.
They just like stand. So you start out that game just like standing on a balcony overlooking the city, which is already visually stunning. And then like every object on the balcony can be interacted with in a fun and clever way. Mm-hmm. And so everyone who plays the game, everyone who starts playing the game, they just stay on that balcony for like 10 minutes. And they're not even getting into the game. They're just like, you turn the dial on the radio and it changes the radio station. And then you pull the radio antenna out. And like everything is like that. And it's like, man, this actually in a way reminds me of what it was like to play, you know, something like EverQuest, where just the notion that the other people in the space with you are people and not just monsters or just NPCs.
Yeah.
That was incredibly fresh and enticing at the time. And now we're just over it now.
I think freshness is like one of the most important factors in this whole thing, because I think I found the more games I play, the more I understand about games, and the more I just kind of automatically go into I'm playing this type of game mode, and I stop paying attention to the things. And so it's only the moments that it is something entirely fresh and new that get me to stop and go, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
Look at this.
This is the macrocosm of the arcade cabinets of yore, where everyone plays Pac-Man and then they get good at Pac-Man and stop playing Pac-Man, so they have to make Pac-Man harder, except for entire genres of game. Because,
and it's compounded the longer you're alive. Like this is the struggle of getting old, where you just get jaded about everything
but I
because
think
you've experienced it.
I think that's why you and I have gravitated towards story games. Or just speaking for myself, like Soma is like there almost isn't gameplay. Like the gameplay to the extent that it exists is a little bit of puzzle solving, basically. Barely even that, actually. But really it's a story. It's a movie that you are where you are the protagonist, and it actually takes really clever advantage of that, because the whole fun part is that you are making these moral decisions where you can actually choose A or B, and they both options have some kind of horrible consequence. And you're allowed to make either one. The game won't stop you. And then you make the choice, and then you have to just kind of live with it. Which is different from watching the movie, where you're just watching a character do things. You're not making the choice yourself. And so like that's, I love that. And that has nothing really, there is no gameplay loop to that game. So that's not that I'm saying I'm like above playing games anymore. Like I still play StarCraft 2 as a way to kind of wind down. I play chess on my phone, which are both games that are pure gameplay loop with no story, right? So it's just kind of like what mood am I in, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting that I think over the course of this conversation, I've kind of realized that I have at some point in my life transitioned from looking backwards towards the experiences I had when I was young and chasing that exact thing, towards like openly acknowledging that what I am looking for is something I've never seen before. And I mean, the best game, the most enjoyable gaming experience I've had in like the past 5 years is a game called Outer Wilds that I played last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of the most incredible and fun experiences I've ever had. It's this wonderful game with this rich, fascinating story that you're kind of investigating as you fly around the galaxy, the solar system. It's a time loop game, which usually I don't like those type of games. Like Majora's Mask is a game I never really got into because I just have trouble with these time loop games, but it uses that to great effect. It's a powerful experience, and it was such a joy to play. And it's interesting to me. I think this was probably always true, but like indie games are the only place that I'm really finding these experiences anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's interesting because I would call God of War like a huge exception. Just in terms of. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like my thing is like I loved God of War. I loved that game. I loved The Last of Us Part 2. Loved that game. But like I love those games in a different way that I loved this game. Like I love those games because I enjoyed my time with them and I thought they told a good story and I was appreciative of what the game was trying to do and on an artistic level. Like Outer Wilds to me was an experience that I will not be able to replicate no matter how hard I try.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, that's I really do want to play that one. And I've seen some of the gameplay, and I kind of get what you mean. And it's like it kind of has the two elements that we just talked about as being important, where it seems like it has a really solid story that sucks you in and invests you, and then it seems like there's a lot of freshness in terms of like, oh, that's interesting. You're flying around between planets, and there's a time loop mechanism, which is not perfectly new, but it seems like it's used, and there's a twist to it that makes it more fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think there's, we talk about the idea of like being tossed into a game without any kind of direction and how I really feel like I didn't have the patience for that type of game anymore. And so Outer Wilds, you're kind of sort of, they kind of hold you by the hand for the first 15 minutes and then the game opens up and is like, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Mm-hmm. And what I was fascinated by was the way the game allowed me to buy into that central concept in a way that I wasn't, because I mean, a lot of times what happens to me when I have too many options in video games is I get overwhelmed by the choice and therefore don't choose anything. I choose not to choose and I just bail out. Yeah. Like a lot of some really complicated, really, really complex games just scare me away from them because there's too many options. I get overwhelmed and I just don't know what to do. And I want to make the quote unquote right choice. I don't want to make the wrong choice. And so it's choice phobia and I get the hell out of there. And this game sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say this feels like every MMO made between EverQuest and World of Warcraft where you're just assaulted with menus and options and subquests once you log in and you're like, what am I doing anymore?
I tried to play Warframe. I actually put a lot of hours into it, but I am too stupid to play that game. It's just there's so many interlocking systems where I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to shoot bad guys. Mm-hmm. And if my character has bad gear, that's okay. And then I got bored with it pretty quickly because
And there's people that absolutely adore those super complex interlocking systems. Like Michael is one of those people that just loves that type of game. And I'm overwhelmed by it. I think I'm just afraid of I'm so afraid of making the wrong choice that I let it distract me from, you're supposed to figure it out and experiment. And I don't know. And I think Outer Wilds is a game that the gameplay itself is so simplistic and it's just fly around, explore, read messages on the wall, try to piece together this mystery. That it took my choice phobia away because especially since it's on a loop. So I'm going to go fly towards this planet on this loop and I'm going to fuck around for a bit. And if I don't figure it out, if I don't find anything interesting, then I'll go to this other planet. If I do find something interesting and run out of time, then I'll go back there and I'll know where I'm heading. So I'll have a little bit more time to dive into this part and maybe unlock this thing that leads me to this place. And then it balances the desire to explore and the unfolding mystery in this perfect way that was just absolute crack for me. And it was just there is a part of me that was afraid that I was doing things wrong by not being into this type of exploration anymore. I mean, when I first played EverQuest, I would just run around. I remember I just spent an entire day not fighting things, not leveling up, just running around. I found this. There's Honor Hold. I don't know if you remember Honor Hold.
No.
But it's just this castle in the middle of this pass in the mountains between two big plains areas, and it has all these secrets, doors, and places and stuff in it. And I just explore that for like an hour, and I've lost that part of myself at some point. And there are games that try to get you to do that. Like even Breath of the Wild, a game that I enjoyed, I just didn't feel the pull to explore as much in that game. I kind of fucked around for a little bit, and then I said, I think I'm going to go kill the things that the game wants me to kill.
Well, I think one thing that may be working below the level of consciousness, and maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like it sounds like Outer Wilds is giving you fairly well structured like hits of surprise and a feeling of success.
Yes.
Whereas many games, you don't really feel that. And a perfect analogy is just real life. When I go for a walk, when I go on one of my pandemic constitutionals, I walk the same exact path every single time, which is actually really delightful because one fun thing that I've noticed for the first time in my life is the little details of how the terrain changes over the course of the year and what plants grow in the early spring versus late spring versus early summer, and the birds are here now, and all these things. But I never really feel like I should go a different direction because it's like, well, what am I expecting to find? It's just going to be, I know it's going to be sidewalks and houses, and there might be like a cool tree, but I'm not. It's not motivating. But then some games definitely, and they're designed to be this way, and they do it on purpose. They do motivate you to explore because they give you little rewards for exploring.
And in some games, you very quickly kind of grok what the reward structure is for exploring, and you mentally realize it's not worth it, which is I think kind of how Breath of the Wild becomes, where it's like there is this vast world you could explore, but you're just going to get a cool sword that'll break eventually.
Or it's just a bunch of temples with various puzzles that are interesting. I enjoy the puzzles, but like not enough to make me just run in X direction for 30 minutes.
It's the No Man's Sky effect where it's like, all right, there are trillions of unique worlds, but
who cares?
Why?
It reminds me of, like Myst, I think is a sort of classic for many reasons. I never actually played it, which is kind of embarrassing because I love the idea of Myst, but the point.
You played Riven
a little bit. I didn't beat it.
I've never beaten any of those games.
Yeah.
I played them. I played them all and never beaten them.
But the point of bringing it up, and maybe it's funny because maybe it's kind of a bad example because apparently it wasn't compelling enough to make us beat it. But the point
really
is
fucking hard.
It was really hard, and when I tried to play it, I think I was too young. I was literally not smart enough. But the point is, like, you want to beat the puzzle so you can solve the mystery, because every time it teaches you fairly early on that solving puzzles unlocks a little bit more of the mystery, and it's very it's kind of a fun, creepy mystery where you're like, what the hell's going on? Like what is this? Where am I? Who are these guys stuck in books?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. Like, and I know this is a difficult one to answer. Like, if you were to pick up Myst now, do you think you could get into it?
I doubt it, and I think it's because every time I picked it up, I would be thinking about all of the other more important things I should be doing.
This is something we've referenced a couple of times, and I think we talked about this a lot in the MMO podcast. But it's like the extent to which our gaming like education was sculpted by games being our entire lives or at least a non-trivial fraction of our lives.
Yeah.
Or like the only thing we were doing at the time for fun.
There's nothing better you could be doing right now.
Yeah.
I think is the way of putting it.
Right. And like, we jokingly refer to different things we've done, Math, as like our EverQuests, because we got so into them that like we just burned all candles at all ends on that thing because it was the fascination lottery on that thing. And that doesn't happen to me with games anymore because I do have so many other things occupying so many fractions of my like mind volume that I can't get that into games anymore. And that's important.
Yeah. One, this is maybe a zigzag in the conversation, but I notice looking at the list of games that the three of us have written down as being like important games we wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah, we were going to do that.
But
oh yeah, I totally took us off that task. I'm sorry.
That's the point of the show. But I was going to make an observation, which is like me and Scott actually mainly picked out single player games, and Daniel almost exclusively picked out multiplayer games. I just think I thought that was interesting, and I wanted to ask Daniel about that. I guess.
So one thing was I didn't want to just how come, Daniel? I didn't want to just write down all the same games as you guys because that's one thing. But beyond that, these are actually as important to Daniel, and it's because I really like multiplayer games, and I like them because I think in the similar way that people like playing like pickup basketball or whatever, where it's like it's a clear thing that has an extremely high potential skill ceiling, where the gameplay is different almost every time. Like a well-designed multiplayer game has like extremely high tactical depth and novelty every time you do it. It's not like you're doing exactly the same thing every single game because, there's a human behind every other pilot in the game. So yeah, just some examples. We already talked about Tribes 2 as being the best first-person shooter. It's not even, it's something that transcends first-person shooting because it has so many other elements. It has like base building, it has vehicle combat, it has this crazy like high kinetic motion flying jetpacks, energy management for your energy with your jetpack, and like crazy ballistic timing shots you have to pull off to be able to hit people, and that people get good at, and so that it only makes the skill ceiling even higher. Like, it's an amazing game. I wish the sequels to Tribes 2 didn't get completely annihilated by microtransactions and companies failing. That is a tragedy because it's so good. But I also played, I think my first serious first person shooter I played was this silly game called Soldier of Fortune 2. And I don't Scott, have you played Soldier of Fortune 2?
I have not.
So it's pretty bad. Like, it has a single player campaign that's kind of garbage, but the multiplayer was in the same vein of many multiplayer games of this era, where it had like pretty extensive map modding communities that would like just make cool maps, had a pretty extensive competitive scene with like different people and different clans like fighting in tournaments and stuff. And all of my brother's friends were in a clan that they wouldn't let me join. And I was so upset by this that I just felt like I had to get good enough to be allowed in their clan, but they never let me in, even though I would kill them all day on their server. Yeah. And I was like objectively better than just about all of them at this game.
Yeah, no, you were. And I just want to clarify, I wasn't even in their clan because I didn't really play that game. But I played it a bit.
It was very much like a Counter-Strike clone. Like there wasn't anything special going on in this game. It just,
I think it was, my recollection is that it went more in the direction of like, it was really easy to kill people. Like the guns are really realistic, quote unquote. And also,
time to kill was shorter.
Strike too.
Yeah,
it was
so. Yeah,
it was comparable, if slightly shorter time to kill than Counter-Strike. Yes,
and also it was super gory. Was the fun part?
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Where like he shoots somebody in the legs, and there would be like giblets and then arterial spray pumping out of their stump for like a few seconds. Yeah, it was
which
great.
I found just hilarious.
Yeah.
It's weird to me that I like these games you're talking about. I just never have been that into them. The closest I got was Counter-Strike, which I played probably a lot over the course of the years. I've played a lot of Counter-Strike, but it was never like, I don't know, like it never sucked me in. Like I can never play one of these games for like a 5 to 8 hour stretch. Like even when I was a kid and had nothing better to do, like the most I could play Counter-Strike for was like 2 hours, and then I wanted to do something else.
I think I would just get stressed out after playing that long, like more than 2 hours. Because it's stressful. Like it's like you're trying to win continuously for 2 hours, and like after a certain point, you just got to take a break because you're too excited.
I've just always been really bad at FPSs.
Yes, I've been. That is also true.
Which I think the big difference between me and Daniel, and I know this because we lived together for many years, is like, he plays a game more and he gets better at it until he gets really, really good at it. I play a game more and I kind of just stagnate. Like I think it has to do with my mental approach to games. And I don't think this is just me navel gazing. I think this is actually an interesting topic for conversation here in the context of game design, because I think different people approach games differently. Like I think Michael and Daniel approach games radically differently than I do, where like if they're failing at an FPS, and Daniel, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but like I think that you like consider what you're doing wrong, and I have no like faith in my ability to figure that out for some reason. I'm just like, I'm just not good.
Yeah, I'll just keep running into the wall. Like that is how I approach multiplayer games. We're just like, I'm so bad at this. I guess I'll just keep doing exactly what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. Me too.
It's definitely the, like, maybe to draw an analogy with chess, where it's like you spend a ton of time, or even Go, where it's like lose 50 games quickly. Like it takes a lot of effort before you see the gradients on which you can become better. And like if you have the patience / if you find it fun to figure out what those gradients are, then the game reveals to you how to become better at it. But it's like, I agree that is not for everyone, right? Like it is actually fun to just like join a game and just like shoot your shotgun at people and then die repeatedly. Like I do that. Like it's definitely a mode of play where like one mode of play is autopilot, where you're just like, I just want to shoot some mans and I don't really want to think tactically about like, what should I have done in that situation? And the other mode of play, which is actually much more tiring, and will make me stop playing a game more quickly if I'm not getting better at it / it's just exhausting, is the like, how do I actually become better at this thing?
Yeah. I think usually when I sit down to play a game like that, which I generally just don't anymore, it's because I'm like mentally tired and I'm like, I just want to shoot some mans.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, at the same time I'm saying that I never tried to get better at like a Counter-Strike game. I raided in WoW for 2 years solid, like straight, like on the same group of people raiding together. Like I think from the Burning Crusade to Cataclysm, I was raiding every week with the same people, and I was constantly trying and working at getting better at that. So I think it's just the type of game. Like I look at a game like Counter-Strike and I look at, why should I have to think about getting better at this? I'm just going to smash my head into the monitor, and then that's fun. Except when it stops being fun because I keep losing. Whereas like in World of Warcraft, like I read constantly about how to play my class better, and studied the fights before we went into the fights, because raiding in those games now, like EverQuest was a game about community. WoW and Final Fantasy 14 and modern MMOs are games about communication. Like it's not, the community aspect doesn't matter so much as just being able to successfully communicate with 10 to 20 people.
Yeah.
And that's it. But like, so it's interesting that like it's what type of games like set off that desire to get better is different for every single person.
Yeah, exactly. At some very early point, I just failed to learn to care about getting better at FPSs specifically. I don't know. I mean, it might literally be like a deep sort of dispositional thing, because like I also play StarCraft 2 in the same way, where it's like, I know what I should do to get better. What I should do to get better is, as soon as I lose a game or win a game, I should click watch replay, and then I should watch what I did and watch what my opponent did, and think about it and be like, okay, well, obviously that was a mistake, and how do I avoid doing that sort of thing again? But no, what do? I click find a new game and I just play again.
This is me in chess, where like,
yes, me too.
Like I can't help but sit back and be like, I know how to write a program that would be better than me at chess, than better almost any human than at chess. Yeah. And it's like, why should I hone this particular knife when I see exactly what being good at this entails? It's like many hours of like trying to absorb a complicated function of pattern matching and calculating that really just boils down to intuition after a certain amount of time.
and thus it becomes, I mean, this is true for me at least, is it becomes just a stimmy thing to do with your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't feel like doing other things right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's some games you're okay with the game becoming your job. And some games you're not, right? I mean, and you draw that line of distinction. Like, I was okay with treating World of Warcraft like it was a second job.
Yeah.
I've never been okay with treating a first-person shooter like I need to work at it. And the reason I think I love these precision platformers is because I do think that kind of training happens without your knowledge, because you just keep playing it and like your brain adapts and you don't have to like consciously think about that you're working. And so I know like I will bash my head against that and make incremental progress and learn, and my reflexes will get sharper, but I'm not like aware of it.
Yeah,
so
no, this is important.
This is work.
This is super important though. This is like, how much does a game teach you how to play it? Like how much is it making it feel seamless versus how much does it need to be intentional on your part? And like, you know, something like, you know, Guitar Hero, you will not, I guarantee you will get better at Guitar Hero by playing any amount of Guitar Hero.
Yep.
Because that's just how rhythm games are, man. That's like how that's literally what they are. It's just like a
so addicting
game playing tutorial simulator for becoming better at it. Whereas like things like StarCraft and first person shooters, it's like, it actually requires a lot of cogitating to figure out exactly what you did wrong, and probably reading analysis of people that are better than you. Yeah. And sometimes you just screw up and it's irrecoverable. And now you can't do anything for the next 5 minutes or so because you just got to lose slowly.
There's a really, sorry. I just wanted to inject. There's a really fun God of War talk on game design on YouTube, where they talk about how they set it up so that you accidentally do useful things, and then you're like, hold on, how did I do that?
I mean, like the thing that's wild about this thing is the more I study game design, the more I realize I'm not aware of the millions of things that goes into each and every development decision in this whole thing. Like, I don't know if you guys watch the Game Maker's Toolkit YouTube channel. It's like one of my favorite YouTube channels because this guy studies game design and talks to the game designers about the choices they make, and it's just really fascinating.
I'm subscribing right now.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say, just as a complete side note, Matt and this whole God of War thing is the most adorable thing in the world, because I've never seen you get as into a game as you've gotten with this game.
Yeah.
And like that's why we're going to do this whole Doofcast about it, because I want to talk to you for an hour about what it is about this game specifically that triggered this love that I have never seen in you in the entire time I've known you.
Yeah.
You didn't know him when he was playing the Riddick game. So.
No, that's true. That's true. I mean,
well, no, I
actually you might have, but
it was close. I mean, I love the Riddick game, but I've definitely put way more hours into God of War, and I can say why. Like, we'll save it. I think we'll save it, but like, I don't think I'm going to say anything like super surprising. It's just like, hey, the story really resonates with me, and I find it incredibly fun. And then I think you can really drill down into like, okay, why is it incredibly fun?
Right. Well, I mean, it's just like, I know you talk to Matt a lot, Daniel. Maybe you've seen this, but like, I'll just be having a conversation with him, and he'll say, "This reminds me of something with God of War," and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, what is happening?
This is something that's part of both of our personalities, where we fixate on a particular example of a thing until we understand everything about why that thing is working for us. And we both do this with like books, with movies, with games. I probably do it more with games than he does, just because I play more games than you, Matt. But like, it's totally a thing. This is totally a Freeman Brothers thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think totally, and I mean that's like part of the reason why Matt and I have this whole suite of podcasts we talk about. But I think like the shock to me was seeing it with a video game for the first time, because I mean, like, to your point, Matt, even when you were playing StarCraft a lot, like, you weren't talking about StarCraft all the time,
right? Because I mean, I kind of don't care about StarCraft.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think a lot of it does have to do with like the emotional connection. If God of War didn't have the story that it has, if it was just Axeman chops guys, I don't think I would have gotten into it really.
Yeah. And to preface our conversation on the Doofcast, playing this game after having a son. Oh boy.
Absolutely.
Oh boy.
Exactly.
I was not ready.
No, it's amazing. It's like perfectly done. Yeah, and I mean that's one game where you actually have the advantage of like if you do care to look into it, you can look at all these. Yeah, I think it's like the GDC conference where they actually put the put talks by the game designers on YouTube. And so there'll be like the guy who's responsible for like combat, and then the guy who's responsible for level design, the guy who's responsible for the director of the whole game, and like and it's just so fascinating to see like, okay, that was I didn't consciously notice that, but now that you pointed out, yeah, that makes sense. Or maybe like, yeah, I did consciously notice that, but now I see how it fits into a bigger picture. So that's super cool. It's super cool that exists. Like that if anything makes me more interested, because it's like, oh, there's explanations I can study.
Yeah. There's a whole like hour-long documentary about every single design decision in Outer Wilds that I immediately watched.
That's awesome. That's fun. Yeah, I think it's just like we're again like it's like an age thing. Like where we are now is like that's interesting. I want to understand that, which is like a totally separate from like I don't want to play Dr. Mario. I want to understand the decisions that went
Dr.
into.
Mario.
Yeah, I want to build Dr. Mario. Yeah, right.
I mean, I honestly think more about designing games than I have ever either actually design games or play games nowadays. It's just like my time wasting hobby is to just like think about the game that I wish I played.
See, this is fascinating to me because I am the exact opposite. Like I have no interest in designing a game. I have zero interest. I love like inspecting them and wondering how they work and trying to figure them out. I mean, I guess it's the same with like movies and stories, right? Like I don't have a lot of interest in like writing a story, but I do love to study them. And I mean, this is like what happened in high school, and before I played a bunch of video games, and then it came time to go to college, and so I was like, what do I do? What do I do with my life? I don't know. I like games. I guess I'll design them. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, I like playing them.
Yeah,
that's different. And it's like, I don't know, like that's always been a part of who I am. And I find that really interesting because we can both like, that's kind of the dynamic with you and me, Matt, is like, we both love to break apart story and function of something, but we come at it from completely different desires.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting.
Right. Cause I then often, every once in a while I'll do the right thing story. And I think 9 times out of 10, it's like, I've found some idea in the course of doing a Doofcast or perhaps a Kingslingers episode. And I'm like, I want to turn this around in my head and see how it feels in my hands, basically. And like, that's the whole reason for writing the story is I want to explore this little facet of storytelling. Sure. And that's kind of how I'm always approaching our conversations, which, yeah, it's interesting because the thing about Daniel and I, it's funny because this is so fundamental that I forgot about it. It's like background chatter to me. But the fact that like we actually would spend a lot of our like play that we would do when there was no computer around would be like design, like out loud designing, and then sort of merging between verbally designing and then like enacting, like the perfect game, if you will. Do you remember this?
No.
I think what we wanted it to be was going to be some kind of like, I mean, it's funny because Daniel might have a totally different impression than I do, but like something between StarCraft and an FPS, where it's like there's a full scale war, and you were like some sort of commander, but also you're a soldier with a gun, and the fun, I guess, would be like both commanding people who may be players or maybe AIs, and then also being a combatant.
Yeah, I remember this. Actually, I remember very specifically. This was one of the pieces of like the mythical things of our youth was the game Command and Conquer Tiberian Sun.
Yes.
Which didn't come out for like many years, and it was always on the horizon as like, because we played Command and Conquer and we loved Command and Conquer. I started playing that that was maybe one of the first games I played when I was like 7 or 6, even. Like, it was very early. And we saw like a trailer for this game, for the sequel, Tiberian Sun. Yeah. And I think in the trailer, it sort of intimated that this is a thing that could happen, that like, you saw the battle from above, and then it like zoomed in to one of the people fighting. And I was like, immediately, I think both of us were like, oh, this is going to be awesome. You're going to be able to like control units, and then you'll be able to like jump into them and then like shoot mans, and then jump out and like control. And I will note, they haven't actually made a game. I think they sort of have made games like this, but they haven't actually made the game where you can really do this yet.
Not the one that we designed.
Not the one that we designed in our minds. But yeah, I mean, this I totally remember that.
It's just funny because I realized that we have in fact been doing this since we were children, and it was a fun thing that we did together, and maybe that's like part of why you do that now. Actually,
yeah. I mean, no, I'm trying to find the game that I want to play, Matt. It's all.
Well, you gotta make it.
Gotta make it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Actually, I like what Wildbo says, where he's like, you should write to fill the missing space on your bookshelf, where you're like, why doesn't that book exist? This story I have in my mind, it's annoying that this book doesn't exist, and then like it's a fun kind of motivation to drive you to creativity.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost the only way to satisfy that, right? Like, it's very unlikely that someone else is going to go about and make exactly the thing that you want, and might as well just make it yourself.
Yeah. All right. I think I've hit the points I wanted to hit. I see y'all have some other points on your lists, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to go in any other directions that haven't been covered yet, because we've been going for a while now.
No, I mean, I think I got everything I wanted to do. Like, the only thing I would do after this is just complain more about modern game design, and I don't feel like I want to do that anymore.
Oh, so how about I have one thing I wanted to just broach that might be a constructive way of attacking that idea, which is, should games be frustrating?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent.
Yeah. I think they almost have to be, but it all gets down to like, did the designer anticipate? This is the entire point of playtesting games is they literally put people in the chair and give them the controller and watch what they do and respond to their complaints. And the goal isn't to just be like, oh no, they're experiencing frustration, we better smooth that over. It's like, no, like, are they having fun? When they become frustrated, how do they react to feeling frustrated? Do they put the controller down and act like they want to leave? Or do they like, pause for a moment, think about it, and then re-engage? And so it's like, okay, frustration is actually, I think, a key ingredient, but it's like, how did you design the game in a way where the frustration motivates you to push through? Or is it frustration that you're just like, I'm frustrated and I have no faith that I can solve this?
And I think everyone feels frustration in different ways as a result of different things. Like, when I'm stuck on something and it's really difficult, I usually don't get that frustrated. Like, the things that really frustrate me to like wanting to throw my controller at something is when I feel like something's unfair.
Yeah.
That's when it gets, and like, the problem is, just because I feel it's unfair doesn't necessarily mean it is unfair, but there is something happening in the game that is driving me to this feeling of, that is not fair, what's happening. And so another way of phrasing the question is like, should you design things that sometimes it's not fair?
Yeah. Like, I think definitely yes, still. Like, I'm reminded of, so when I played WoW, I played on a PvP server, and one of the great things about classic WoW PvP is that higher level characters than you can just come around and stomp you repeatedly, and there's very little you can do about it, short of calling one of your other high level friends to come stomp them. But if you don't have any high level friends around, then you'll just keep getting stomped repeatedly. And this is a deeply frustrating experience, but it's also sort of like the seed of an interesting like social dynamic where it's like you're at war with this other race of people, right? Like that's the game. That's like the social metagame sitting on top of the game. And it is actually fun to like become a higher level character and go back and like avenge yourself or your previous self by doing war upon the other like this is a whole dynamic, right? Like you couldn't this dynamic couldn't exist without someone being on the receiving end of the unfair noob stomping.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. Like, I never liked playing on a PvP server. I mean, I did it in World of Warcraft because like I felt like you were supposed to. Like that's just like the way they build World of Warcraft in Classic was like that's what you're supposed to be doing. And so I did it, and like I mean, there were times when World PvP was like super fun when like you're leveling up in an area and someone else your level is leveling up an area, and you have this real back and forth where like you get the jump on them once and then they pay you back by getting the jump on you, and like this just really dynamic like push and pull that I thought was really fun. But yeah, the times when a level 60 rogue just decides to spend the next 2 hours ruining your life for no reason is like that's awful. And like I feel like a lot of times these designs are like making it okay to be terrible and supporting terrible behavior in players. And that's when I draw the line at unfairness.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
I don't want a system that rewards bad behavior.
It's not even like you're being rewarded though, right? Like they don't get anything out of that. They just get the satisfaction. Like they're getting coins for killing you. It's just like,
I guess, yeah. Like you're right. They don't get anything tangible, but yeah, it's psychological warfare. They know they're pissing you off and they're loving it. And it's just like, why do we want a system in which that person is successful?
I feel like it's more honest. Like I actually really don't like the games that put everything.
Honesty? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's right. This is the core of the thing, right? Like how frustrating.
Yeah.
What is your tolerance for frustration,
right.
and like what do you perceive to be fair, and like how much are you okay with that? Like this is the whole.
Yeah,
the whole thing.
I think it makes sense to like loop it back around to EverQuest to conclude, because I think the biggest the hill that I will die on with regards to the stupid stuff being the point is like classic EQ. The travel was incredibly difficult and time consuming and dangerous and intense, and like choosing to travel was like a decision that you would undertake with about the same level of seriousness as like Frodo and the Fellowship, like getting ready to go to Mordor. And it's like that's good, that's awesome actually, because like knowing that you can just cross the world instantly takes something out of the game actually. Like just you don't want to just be where you're going. The travel and the danger and the stress and yes the frustration is actually like super desirable. And you know, and then it was also, the funny part is it was also unfair because like wizards could just teleport wherever they wanted at a certain level, and then you're like, okay, hold on a second, like that seems broken, but that's also fine in a sense where it's like, yeah, life's not fair sometimes.
Now there's a whole economy around wizards and druids porting around the world.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is, the reason there's an economy is because it sucks, and it's fun one time. It's fun to run from Kelethin to Freeport one time. It's not fun the 100th time. It's not, and it's like I totally get what you mean, and it's just like the thing with unfairness. It's like, is it fun to level up your magician to level 60 and then be told by the meta of the game that your only role in raids is to summon right-click mana battery sticks and drop them on the floor for an hour and a half? And do you want to re-roll like a better character? Yeah, enjoy playing the game for another 200. Like, it's not fair, and it's not fun, and it's not good design.
Yeah, well, yes, I think there's a sort of terminal problem with all these MMOs where you get to the end game and there is no solution to the equation of like, how do you make this continue to be fun forever? It's like, no, you're not gonna. There's no way to make that still be fun after you have the max level care. Like all you could do would be just continue to add levels and then it's like, okay, but you're already a demigod. What do you want? Okay, now we have like an undead undead dragon. Yeah, it's got, and it's invisible.
Well, no, what you do is you make the gameplay fun, which is not something EverQuest did.
Well, I mean, I think the same applies to all these MMOs. In any MMO that has a level, that any MMO where like the point is you just grind and then you're the max level, and then what are you supposed to do? You know?
Well, I mean, like this is Final Fantasy 14 is supposedly, I don't know how much truth there is to this, but it's supposedly bigger than World of Warcraft now. The jury's out on that actual statistic. I don't know. I just saw an article that said it was true the other day. This is a game that is by design meant for you to hop in when a new patch comes, beat the patch, beat the content. You can do it in a few weeks, and then just stop playing the game if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you just stop playing the game?
This makes me kind of sad though. Like even though this is probably an objectively healthier way of designing an MMO, where it's like episodic and more just like an RPG that you happen to release DLC for that's online also. Like that, I don't even really think of FF14 and EverQuest being the same type of game, honestly.
They're not. I mean,
yeah,
the community in Final Fantasy 14 isn't important. I mean, you have your own community, like you have your free company or guild, whatever it's called, and those are the people you hang out with. But even like pickup groups in that game are so much more prevalent because the game can actually support playing with random people and succeeding with random people. And they're not trying to do the same thing. I just don't know. I don't know the idea of like a game in which it is an actual world is a thing that anyone actually wants.
But that's what I like. I hate that all about like World of Warcraft has done this too, where like you can see up until, the top 0.5% of players that are doing like mythic rating or whatever, you can do all of the content without speaking to another human being ever. And then only then, if you care about the top 0.5% of like rating content, do you need to actually communicate with other people. And that I just kind of hate that. I wish that the only way to progress in the game required actual interaction with other human beings.
Like in an ideal world, yes, but also I remember logging into EverQuest, sitting down, shouting 65 magician looking for group for 2 hours, and then logging off the game because nobody wanted to group with me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a problem.
I think I guess let me meet you halfway. Like I never got to 65 or even close with any character, and so my experience of EverQuest was always being like a scrappy underdog, and my gear was always like some gloves that I just happened to get off of something that I killed in unrest, and I was basically just like a wandering vagabond trying to make my way in this world. I was never a powerful, like I'd never finished anything. I was always and that was in its way extremely great, but definitely like if I had like maxed out and done everything, and there were no more, there was no more ceiling. There was nowhere else to go except, some of the mana rods. Then I definitely would have found that terrible. So like it's just like okay, they messed up their late game content, but I still love the idea of a game where you're maybe reconceptualize. Like if I was going to make an MMO, then it would be like very radically different, and maybe you don't get more powerful. Like maybe you're like, you got a sword. If you want a sword, you can buy a sword, but it's just a sword. Like you're never going to be able to kill a dragon with a sword because it's a dragon. Like you're going to have to solve this problem some other way. Like you're always going to be small and weak and vulnerable. And if you don't enjoy that, if you don't enjoy being small and weak and vulnerable, then don't play the game. And that's fine. Like people can like different things. I think that's a point we hit on more than once in this conversation.
Certainly. And again, I have to remind you that I played EverQuest for 4 years, and like I obviously enjoyed my time with it. And I kept playing. I kept going back. I would log off at the end of that night, and then I'd log back in the next day. But I just I don't think it's like a desirable end state.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And I think like the reason why World of Warcraft exists, and the reason why everything that Daniel you've said has kind of ruined this thing exists is it didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because everyone hated these systems, and someone said, "Oh, I can make this better." Like an instance dungeon was made because people got tired of shit being camped and they couldn't get anything done.
I mean, the whole existence of a spawn that you camp is such a ridiculous thing.
I mean, it's funny. It's like it was accidental. They never actually imagined that people would do that. They thought people would form one large raiding party and then clear out the dungeon in one swoop and then leave. And
so, I mean, it was accidental, but it was also the inevitable end state. It's like George Washington saying, "Don't form political parties." It's you built a system in which that's going to happen no matter what.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely just objectively poor design because the thing they designed it to do didn't work. Like they never imagined that people would camp the treant spawn. It's like they thought that was going to be a roving scary monster on the landscape, and then it turned into no, I'm just going to use this as a resource to get gold and experience, which is not what they designed it for, and thus bad design, right? I totally agree with that. I think it's more like I'm fascinated by trying to think through what were the things that made it so compelling, even if they were accidents, and then how would you distill those into
have all of the good parts of it, but not the horrible parts that are clearly optimized and become terrible in the end. Because
this is the question that we've been asking about government and civilization since its birth, exactly. Right? It's like we develop systems to make our experience in this terrible world slightly better for us.
Yes, this is why. Completely seriously, this is why I find talking about EverQuest to be interesting. Is that it is a sort of proxy for talking about utopia, because what you're talking about is designing a world that you would prefer to live in. Assuming your basic necessities are met, right? And it's well, okay, that's not as easy a problem as it sounds like. If you can't even design a video game that you would prefer to live in, good luck designing an actual government that you would prefer to the one that we have.
Yeah.
All right.
I would not want to live in the EverQuest government. I'll say that right now.
There were times in my life where I wanted to live in the EverQuest government, but not anymore, I don't think.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me to talk about video games. This is only our second video game episode. I think we'll probably need to put some space to have some more serious topics.
Yeah.
Regain our credibility a little bit. But thanks for joining us, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun. Sorry, I hope I didn't take over the conversation too much.
No, this was we need fresh voices to liven up the experience here.
Yeah, and we didn't actually know what exactly the point of the conversation was going to be, but I think we stumbled into some fun little ravines.
Yeah, and in conclusion, roguelikes are bad.
Yeah, in conclusion, we can all agree that roguelikes are just pointless, I think. Yeah. All right. Good.
Yeah. Not even gonna. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Well, thanks, Scott, and of course, as always, thank you as well, Daniel. And we'll see you all next week.
See y'all.
Month, Matt. Month. You don't do this every
month.
Frick. We screwed up.